We can begin. I would like to welcome everyone to the 13th meeting of the 46th year of the Rotary Club of Dublin and Worthington. Today's invocation and pledge will be delivered by Wynn Wixel.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's pray. Our Father who art in heaven, we gather as Rotarians, mindful of our heritage as Rotarians and citizens of this nation. We give thanks for these blessings and opportunities. We give thanks for your presence in our lives. In this year, we have experienced several complicated, stress-filled, and trying situations. Pandemic, economics up and downs, international upheavals, and national unrest. We ask your help in being with each of us to remind us of your comforting presence. We thank you for the nudges and ideas given us during this past 9 months. Help us to hear and act on them. Help us to act as a responsible group of Rotarians where your hand is needed. And help us, guide us with our responsibility as citizens when we vote in this election, and help us to provide liberty and justice for all, as stated in our Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you now for hearing each of our individual prayers at this time. We pause for 10 seconds to honor these prayers. Amen. Okay, would you now join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Back to you, James.
Thank you, Wynn. At this point, President-elect Steve will please introduce any guests that you may be aware of.
Yes, I see one guest among us, and that is Andy Keeler from Keeler and Nadler Family Wealth. Mark Beaver, you're here. Go ahead and introduce our guest.
Yep, Andy, as you mentioned, he's our president and CEO, founder. Andy is also a newly elected Dublin City Councilman, so you can send your complaints to him and eventually get around to addressing those. But now he wanted to join us today. He's also a member of the Dublin AM Club.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andy, for joining us. Our speaker, Rita, will be introduced in a little bit. So that will take us to Happy Dollars. And I have a happy dollar to share. I apologize that I was not here last week. I'm sure you all missed me, but I was out with my wife celebrating our 9th wedding anniversary. So Jennifer, if you want to bill me accordingly, go ahead. $1, $10, let's do $9. Throw $9 on my bill. So yes, who else has a happy dollar?
I certainly do, because I was able to, thanks to my sister, attend virtually the Ohio State game, and it came out right. And hopefully this weekend, the game will come out right.
Yeah, awesome.
I got one.
Andrew, you had one?
Yeah, my son had successful surgery last week. He got his tonsils out, and he enjoyed all the ice cream and yogurt and pudding that he gets to have for the next couple of days. So it's cool.
Nice. What's his preference?
Everything vanilla, everything ice cream. Let's just say that.
Gotcha. Cool, cool. Anybody else with a happy dollar?
This is Jim Farmer. I've got one. My granddaughter is 1 year old. And there she
All
is.
right. Very cute. Very cute. Congrats.
We enjoyed her birthday dinner. She enjoyed her foot.
Awesome. Anybody else?
I do.
Go for it. Shirley, go ahead.
You're on, Shirley.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not sure. I don't know. I can't hear very well. Okay, I have a happy dollar. I'm very happy to announce that my granddaughter was accepted to Tufts, and she'll be going there next year. She'll graduate the class of 2025. She'll be doing Division III crew for them, but she has been accepted and she'll start there, and I'm very happy for her. It's a good choice.
That's awesome. Congratulations to her.
Yes.
Anybody else? I'll take one more if we got it. Okay,
I will.
then.
I will.
John, go ahead.
Most clubs would be proud and fortunate to have one candidate running for political office. Our club has two running for representative in the Ohio House of Representatives, Beth Liston and Mahek Cook. Unfortunately, they're running for the same office, but we will have a state representative one way or the other. So our club is always known for having quality leaders at every level of government. And this is just another example of that.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. I didn't know that they were competing against each other. I probably should have, and I will stop talking because I'm just showing my ignorance. So we're going to move on to a poll, courtesy of John Butterfield. Everybody gets to participate. So let me go ahead and launch the poll. And it's a fun fact, right? So last February, the club held a personal care item drive for the Worthington Resource Pantry. Approximately 3/4 of our members participated on 5 teams, including one for Snowbirds, which are our members that are in Florida or other places. So the question is, how many items did club members donate? And I'll give it 30 more seconds. We've got 36% voted. 50% have voted. Come on. We're up to 70% voted. These results are getting interesting. 10 more seconds. 75% voted. Okay. All right, then, in the poll. So everybody said, or the majority said 1755, but John, you're gonna have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the correct answer was 2020 items. So yeah, John's giving me the thumbs up. So that was a little fun. All right, back to you, Jim.
Thank you, Steve. At this point, we'll do announcements, and I will ask that if you have an announcement, please unmute yourself and raise your hand. I'll start the announcements, though. In the announcement of next week, we're going to not have a regular speaker, but do a special program that we're calling Inspiring Enthusiastic Engagement. And what we'll be doing is, as a club, having smaller conversations. We'll divide you into chat rooms, and we'll have those discussions around the 4 major committees of our club, or 4 of the major committees of our club. That is including international service, community service, membership, and youth committees. And you'll actually visit in those chat rooms twice and have some discussions with the leaders of those committees. And then we'll share those results back with the overall club. In part, we're doing this because we felt it's been difficult for us to really have discussions as general members and get to know each other a little better and talk about the club with each other because of the large format of Zoom meetings. So I encourage everyone to attend. This input is going to be very important for each of those groups, and they're very interested in hearing from you. There'll be a short presentation on what's going on in each, but the predominant time will be their discussing critical issues for each of those committees. So please do attend our meeting on November 4th. And hopefully people will be attending. You won't be up too late, hopefully, with the election. But do attend the meeting that morning. Thank you. Any other announcements?
I have an
Just to add to that, you know, we're hoping to try and vary up the types of meetings. So this is just kind of first attempt in what should be many more attempts and different types of meetings, you know, to interest everybody in the club. All right, go ahead, Shirley.
Okay. You probably read, and I'm excited to announce about our online auction this year. It will be a little different and we're very lucky. We're going to have the advice of Paula Moulton, Mike Moulton's wife, who is in the auction business. And so she's on vacation this week. And when she gets back, we're going to have a Zoom meeting with her, and I'll know more about the logistics of how it's going to work. But in the meantime, if you're thinking about things you can donate, it'll be a little different this year because you can donate things, re-gifted items, things around your house that you might like to get rid of, and nice items like that. Although we can't do the top shelf liquor and the wine this year, but I'll have a lot more to tell you about. A suggestion might be a gift package of 50 lottery tickets. And I did see where you can rent the whole theater for $100, and that might be a nice item where someone could have their child's birthday party and just rent the whole theater. So we'll come up with some clever ideas, but as you're cleaning out closets and looking at things around your house, those will be items that we'll be able to put into this auction because all of her clients, all of her customers will also be able to bid on them. So we're hoping that that will work. So I'll have more to tell you next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. Other announcements? Well, given none, we will move on to Mark. Today's speaker is going to be introduced by Mark Beaver.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mark.
There you go. I won't take up too much time. I'll let Rita do most of the talking here, but if you're not familiar with Rita Sornin, she's the president and CEO of the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. There's a long list of things that I could read off as far as her recognition in the community, both locally and nationally in this area. But a few of them that I thought I would highlight, because I think Rita humbly will probably not point any of these things out, is that she's testified in front of the U.S. House Ways and Means Committee on the importance of foster care and adoption. She was the recipient of the Angels in Adoption Award from the Congressional Coalition of Adoption Institute. She was also named one of the 20 outstanding women you should know by WSNY. Long list of these things that I could go off of, just recognition and awards that she rightly deserves for the leadership that she's had with Dave Thomas Foundation. Another cool thing, in 2016, she was awarded an honorary doctorate of community leadership from Franklin University. So at that, I'll kind of leave it up to her to tell you about the foundation. So join me in welcoming Rita Sornin.
Thank you, Mark. And gosh, I am so excited to be here today. We've been talking about this for a while with Mark about joining you and sharing a little bit about the foundation. So thank you for letting me do this virtually. I would much rather be in person talking to you, but I think this is the next best thing. I'm going to go ahead and share a screen so that you're not just looking at me, but that you're also following along with some information here on the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. So hopefully you can see that and still see me. And again, this is just an opportunity to share this, I think, gem of an organization in this community that works at a national level, the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. And I always prefer talking to Ohio audiences because you all know the story of Dave Thomas and hopefully the story of the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. But in addition to being the founder of that incredible brand, the Wendy's Company, what you may not know is that he was adopted. And as he was moving on in his career and really looking at that next phase, what he wanted to do is begin to make very public this Wendy's commitment to giving back to the community. And so he combined his personal story of being adopted with this notion that in 1992, when he created the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, there was not a strong conversation about a particular kind of adoption, and that was foster care adoption. So he created the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption to really dramatically focus on increasing the adoptions of children who are in the foster care system through no fault of their own, who because they've been there for so long or because their families have been found to be so unsafe that they can never return home, that they've now been freed for adoption. And he created this foundation in 1992 to really focus on those children in foster care who are simply waiting for adoptive homes. And he created us as a national nonprofit public charity. I think it would have been easy to create a corporate foundation or even a family foundation or a private foundation. But I think he decided that he would make the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption a nonprofit public charity because in order to raise the funds that we need to do the work that we do, we've got to get out and talk about what this issue is and encourage more people to be aware of the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. So a very simple mission, a very simple vision, and a very simple core belief system that we will dramatically increase the adoptions of children out of North America's foster care systems. Our vision is the same vision that all of you share, I think, with your children, with your grandchildren, with anyone that you know, that every child, no matter what their circumstance in life, deserves a safe, loving, and permanent home. And that every child, again, no matter what their circumstances or what their journey through the foster care system is, or what their particular issues may be because of the trauma of abuse that they've experienced or the impact of lingering in foster care, no matter what, every child is adoptable. So that's just the background, but we really do a lot at the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. These are 4 of our core areas, one of which, that first one, Wendy's Wonderful Kids, I'll go into a little bit more detail about in a second, but want to shift to the other 3. We're really lucky that we're moving right into November, which is National Adoption Awareness Month. And so we take advantage of that at the foundation to really elevate and increase the awareness about all kinds of adoption. Certainly, there are 3 kinds of adoption, right? Domestic infant adoption, international adoption, and foster care adoption, as well as step-parent adoption. But those 3 are those kinds of adoption that bring a new person into the family that's not typically biologically related to the family. And National Adoption Day gives us an opportunity to celebrate all kinds of adoption. No matter how a child comes into a home, we want to celebrate that, but we do that with a focus on foster care adoption. And the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, more than 20 years ago, was the lead founder and lead funder of this National Adoption Day initiative. We chose the Saturday before Thanksgiving to celebrate adoptions. Because we're moving into typically that holiday season when family is critically important, and celebrating family is important. But last year, we had National Adoption Day events in all 50 states, the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico and Guam. And it's an opportunity also to celebrate adoptions that are finalized in or around National Adoption Day. And we work with lots of partners on this. And it gives an opportunity to do public relations, communications, and actually have events that celebrate adoption in communities. We also provide a number of free adoption awareness resources and materials. Our job is to increase the conversation about foster care adoption while we drive programs that really do move children from foster care into adoptive homes. So we hand out free of charge or allow downloads of literally tens of thousands of units of materials for families, a beginner's guide to adoption. We worked with the American Academy of Pediatrics, looking at what are the issues involved in the trauma that children experience in foster care for foster care families. Posters, guides, all kinds of things, as well as very robust, if you're on social media, robust Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn accounts that encourage this conversation nationally about foster care adoption. And just this week, we released the 100 Best Adoption-Friendly Workplaces. It's a program that was started by Dave Thomas more than 20 years ago, when he simply called up his best friends, CEOs of other businesses, and said, hey, do you offer benefits to families that are formed through birth? Of course, they did. Well, if you do, why don't you offer benefits to families that are formed through adoption? Those families also need financial support at times. They need paid leave in order to bond with their families. And so we've taken that legacy program that Dave Thomas started and really created a robust package for employers to put adoption benefits in their workplace. And then we celebrate those companies that do offer benefits, paid leave, financial assistance, recognition of foster families in their workplace, robust educational materials in their workplace about families who adopt. So it's all of those ways are ways that we do two things: increase awareness about foster care adoption, and then drive programs that move children out of foster care and into adoptive homes. But if we step back and look at what is the situation in this country right now, children go into foster care through no fault of their own. They've been abused or neglected or abandoned. And it's up to the communities and here in Columbus, for example, Franklin County Children's Services, police departments, to come together and investigate incidences of abuse. The majority of the time, children don't come into care. Either something's simply gone on in the family that doesn't rise to the level of system involvement, or there are services that can be applied to these families. That's our goal, right? We don't want children to come into foster care. We want them to stay with their families, and we want services to be applied if that's at all possible. But right now in this country, 420,000 children are in foster care because the system, those people in the system, social workers, decided that these children needed to be separated from their families of origin for a period of time, put into foster care, hopefully extended family foster care or someone that the child knows, but often stranger foster care, while the courts and the social workers address the issues that are surrounding this family. And you've seen the news frequently. It's issues of substance abuse, issues of domestic violence, all of those kinds of things that surround some of our most vulnerable families. And so our job is to get services in place and get these children home. But for 120,000 children right now in this country, as we're sitting here today, the abuse has risen to such a level. The courts have gone through these processes. The social workers have made attempts to solve the issues in the family. But for 120,000 children, those issues were so profound or unsolvable that the courts made the very important and critical decision, not one that they do lightly, to permanently sever the legal relationship between these families and these children. And we now have 120,000 legal orphans in this country simply waiting for a family to step forward and to adopt them, right? And for us, for the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, the day that we sever that right of a biological family to their child is the day that we make a promise that we will find them another family, because it is critically important. It's the birthright of every child to have a family in which they can grow and thrive. But that last number is what drives the programs and services of the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption every year. We fail to live up to that promise of a family 20,000 times a year in this country. 20,000 children each year turn 18 and leave foster care without the family that we promised them. And what we know is there are profound impacts for children, not because they're bad kids, right? But because they leave a system at age 18, and we try and personalize this every day. Think of any 18-year-old that you know. Are they ready to simply be on their own, find their own job, find their own housing, find their own way through the world? And particularly now in this COVID environment, there are negative impacts on children who at 18 leave foster care without a family. We know from research that 1 in 5 of these children who leave care without a family will become homeless at some point during that first year, and frequently on an extended basis. And those are the ones we know about. So many of our youth end up couch surfing, right? They don't become part of systems, but they kind of move from friend to friend or home to home trying to find their place. Of these kids who age out of care, only 50% will be employed by the age of 24. By age 26, only 4% will have earned a college degree. 70% of former female foster youth will be pregnant by age 21. And again, without those supports around them, become at high risk of moving back into systems. 1 in 4 of our children experience post-traumatic stress syndrome, which is equal to or greater than the experience of our US returning war veterans. So if we have to look at this at a human level, right? These are the negative consequences that happen to our children. But if we look at a community fiscal level, for every young person who ages out of care, that's about $300,000 to a community in social costs for those kids who are, on public assistance or homeless, or when you figure lost wages or involvement in systems because of substance abuse or the criminal justice system. So we look at this at 2 levels. It is the moral imperative, we think, that we find families for these children because that's what they deserve, because that's what we want for every child. But there's an economic cost to not doing that. And now when we look at COVID-19 and our children in care, it adds yet another layer of complications for our kids. Children in foster care have experienced multiple layers of trauma, from the abuse that they experience to the potential multiple moves as they move from foster home to foster home, to those feelings of grief and loss and abandonment. All of those layers of trauma that they experience puts them frequently with compromised immune systems that makes them more likely at times to be susceptible to illness like COVID-19, right? Then we look at the psychological issues that our kids in care, the day that states closed down, that systems closed down, that led to canceled or court hearings. Not all courts are open right now. A lot of courts are doing virtual hearings, but many are not. And so this timeline that they have in care has been extended, even if they were getting ready to be adopted or getting ready to move into a permanent home. And so it adds another layer of trauma in their lives. They've got paused family and social worker visits. If they're with a foster family that's experiencing economic distress or health issues, they may have been located or relocated again to another foster home. If they're in an area that doesn't have strong systems with educational access to online platforms or wireless systems, their education's being compromised during this COVID time. And all of this, certainly puts them in social isolation, which they've already been in their entire lives, building increased anxiety and depression. And one thing we worked a lot on for this state and other states is asking governors to not let children age out of care during this COVID environment, to extend those timelines for those children who are aging out of care, because they're stepping into uncertainty without the supports around them. So it is a dire time for everyone right now, but certainly for our children in care. Just some quick numbers here. Every few years, we do a Harris poll on Americans' attitudes toward children in foster care so that we can address perceptions and misperceptions and get a scan of how do we make sure that we're giving the right messages so that we can move children into homes. And I think these are just some interesting statistics. I won't go through all of them, but know that 40% of Americans have been touched by adoption. 25% of Americans are thinking about adoption, and of those 25%, 70% are thinking about foster care adoption. So how do we get them to really use this, this notion that I can adopt out of foster care, right? One of the statistics that kind of drives us to really do more and do better is that although 80% of Americans know that children are in foster care because they've been harmed in some way, 46% also believe that children are in foster care because they've done something wrong, because they're juvenile delinquents, right? Which couldn't be farther from the truth. These kids may have behaviors that are the result of being in foster care, but that's not what landed them in foster care. So how do we address that misperception that children have done something wrong and that's why they're in care, and that becomes a barrier to getting them adopted? We also know, and it's that little chart, apologies, it's kind of small, but that little chart on the right, that Americans still have a preference for adopting younger children. So infants, toddlers, preschoolers. Only about 15% of Americans have thought about adopting an older child, when that's that target population that we're talking about. With those kids who age out of care. Around 2002, 2003, the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption really burrowed underground and said, what are we doing to impact this notion of foster care adoption? We were doing great work, making one-off grant making, raising awareness. We had used Dave Thomas in so many public service campaigns in order to elevate the conversation, but we weren't really seeing a change in numbers. We weren't really seeing more of these older youth get into adoptive homes. And so we really buckled under and began to look at what are the existing best practices? How are agencies focusing on this target population of children, of the 20,000 children year over year over year, so that in only 5 years' time, 100,000 youth were on, out in the public without a family. And we burrowed under and began to look at what are some of the existing best practices? How do we move this population of children into adoptive homes? How do we address the misperceptions that surround them? How do we address the reality of the complications of the foster care system? And what can we do to move these children into foster care? And so we began new strategies at the foundation, still grant making, still raising awareness, but really narrowing our focus population of children. And it's this focus population of children who are those most at risk of turning 18 and leaving care without a family. We know that the day a child turns 9 in foster care, they've been freed for adoption and they're simply waiting for a family. But at age 9, their likelihood of being adopted decreases significantly. Again, think of any 9-year-old we know, but as Americans, we think, well, you know what? They're too old, right? They can't quite fit into my family. I don't know how I deal with a 9-year-old in my family. So we began to focus on that population of children based on age. We also know that so many of our children come into care with brothers and sisters. And the idea of separating them from their siblings is something that we simply won't do. That's a family unit that remains strong for those children. And yet, that's also a target population that is very risky in terms of aging out of care, because typically when people come into the thinking about adopting, just adopting in general, they're thinking of infants, they're not thinking of a sibling set of 2 or 3. And so that becomes a barrier to adoption, just being a part of a sibling group. Certainly children with special needs, with physical or emotional special needs, again, not a high population in terms of what a family tends to be looking for when they start thinking about adoption. Children who've been in care for so long that as the system begins to work on their behalf, they push against a family. They become oppositional, right? They say, no, thank you. I'll be fine at 18. Just put me on the track for aging out of care. And there's this whole track in foster care called emancipation that so many children are placed in, the emancipation track. And we prepare them for life at 18 without a family, when again, we know family is exactly what they need. And so this became our population of children. How do we develop programs and services that support these youth most at risk of aging out of care? Children age 9 and older, children in sibling groups, children with special needs, children who've been in care for so long, they've given up hope on themselves, and so resist efforts to be adopted. And what we created, and this isn't critical that you look at this and know what this is, but this shows you the model that we created. We actually created a model that we said, what if we developed a strategy for social workers who work in the foster care system? Because when we did that initial scan a number of years ago, what we heard from social workers is, we want to get these kids adopted, but we don't have either the financial resources or the human resources to focus on children. Once they've been freed for adoption, they're placed in a foster home, they're fine, and they'll be on the adoption track. And so we said, well, as a grant making organization, if we created a model, a strategy that could work and provided the resources for them, maybe we would find a winning combination here. And so we developed this model that really is just good social work. It just says, know the children on your caseload, have them involved in this process. There are lots of adults that surround these children in care, from teachers to former foster parents to extended family members. Let's find those people who already surround these children and let's get them adopted, right? But key to that is that social workers who use this strategy have to carry smaller caseloads of children. In foster care, typically 40 to 50 children on a caseload is not unusual. And what we said is, we will give grants to organization to hire a full-time adoption professional to use this model, but you've got to carry a smaller caseload of children, 12 to 15. And so this model just illustrates the idea that as a national nonprofit public charity with resources to share, perhaps we could drive change in a child welfare system that was failing so many children. We also combine that with a rigorous evaluation. So in 2004, we launched this program in 7 pilot sites across the nation. We said, let's test it, let's see if it works. By 2007, we had a footprint in all 50 states with these full-time adoption professionals hired through our grant making in order to implement this model and get children adopted. And we began to see children move very quickly. But what we also knew in 2007 is that we couldn't depend on just what felt good, what looked good, what seemed to be right. We needed a rigorous evaluation to make sure that this was working on behalf of these children. And so we engaged a group in Washington, D.C., Child Trends, to do a 5-year randomized control trial of children served by this program compared to any other business as usual in their child welfare agency. And let's see if this actually does get this target population of children adopted. And what we found at the end of 5 years, that indeed, children are on average about 1.5 times more likely to be adopted when this model is employed, right? And older children, counterintuitively to probably all of us here in the room, the older a child is, when served by this program, they're up to 3 times more likely to be adopted, which is huge. A 300% increase of getting these children adopted in child welfare is a huge shift. Children with specific mental health needs are more than 3 times more likely to be adopted. And key to this is children who were previously opposed to adoption and would tell a judge, no, thank you, I don't want to be adopted. And the judge would listen to them and put them on the emancipation track. Once these children were working with their recruiter, working this strategy, they were much more likely to consider adoption. We also called this model Wendy's Wonderful Kids because we asked our Wendy's partners across the nation if they could help us raise the kind of dollars that it would take to hire these full-time adoption professionals and get these kids moving. And they jumped in big time with in-restaurant campaigns and events, and has allowed us to grow this program significantly. So that at this point today, we have about 490 full-time adoption professionals all across the United States and Canada working this model on behalf of these children. And those solid block states that you see, we've got the program scaled in such a way that there are enough recruiters to cover the target population in that state. So we may have 1 or 2 recruiters in states like Wyoming or Montana that are serving 12 or 15 children. But the reality is in most states, there are hundreds and hundreds and sometimes thousands of children in that target population that need this service. But those solid block yellow states show us where we've been able to work on co-investment relationships with states. So it's not just the Dave Thomas Foundation's for Adoption's responsibility, but the state who has custody of these children work a co-investment relationship so we can get the kind and the number of recruiters in a state to get this job done. To date, we've got nearly 10,000 children who have been adopted through this program. The average age of a child adopted through the Wendy's Wonderful Kids program is 13, which again is very high risk for aging out. 60% of the children adopted through this program have been adopted in their sibling group. 80% of the children adopted through this program have at least one identified special need. Nearly 90% of the children who have been adopted through this program had never had any kind of recruitment efforts on their behalf. They simply were sitting in care waiting to age out. And nearly 20% of the children adopted through this program had already had a failed or a disrupted adoption because the kinds of services that they need had not surrounded the family and the child. So we're thrilled about the success of this program. We've got nearly another 1,000 in their pre-adopted placement, simply waiting for that final court hearing. We're moving numbers significantly. We've also developed a long-term 12-year strategic plan in partnership with some additional funders who've allowed us to flow some additional philanthropy through the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption to take this program to scale. And we know that by 2028, that we will have through this program nearly 60,000 children adopted, 70% more than would have been adopted otherwise. Critical to this is what we also know is that when we move these children out of foster care and into adoptive homes, we're saving tax dollars. First of all, again, it's a moral imperative, it's a legal imperative to find these children homes, but there's a fiscal benefit to it. We save critical dollars when we get these children out of care. And so we conservatively estimate that $1.5 to $2 billion will have been saved in taxpayer dollars simply by doing the right thing, by moving children into adoptive homes. And the foundation has grown significantly in order to do this and in order to make sure that this goal will be reached by 2028. So I'll stop for a second and shift a little bit and say, how can you help? Because that's always the next question. There are a lot of ways for the public to help in this conversation. First and foremost, of course, is consider becoming a foster or an adoptive parent. But that's not always an option to families. And so there's so many more ways to help. And many of you may have already jumped into this. You can certainly volunteer to mentor a child who's in foster care, to partner with a child, to become a friend to a child. You can become an adoption-friendly workplace. If your place of employment doesn't offer adoption benefits, we've got all the tools and resources to help you implement what's very easy to do and cost-effective for employers and become an adoption-friendly workplace. You can become a court-appointed special advocate volunteer here in Franklin County and speak up on behalf of a child in court hearings. You can organize adoption awareness services at your place of worship. It can be an adoption Sunday or an adoption Saturday, and really focus, particularly during National Adoption Month, focus the service on orphans and the needs of children in foster care or need to be adopted, or lunch and learns at your place of work, not unlike what we're doing today. You can connect with the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption and we'll help you understand what policies, state or federal policies are bubbling and need additional public voices to help drive those policies along. And certainly next Tuesday when you vote with children in mind, and always press Council Member Keeler and others, what are you doing on behalf of children in your community, in your state, across the nation? Ways to help the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. Again, we're a nonprofit public charity, so we love our donors and we welcome donations. You can start a Facebook fundraiser. Something very simple: when you visit Wendy's, participate in their in-restaurant campaigns. Right now, it's the Halloween coupon campaign that goes on. For simply $1, you get 5 coupons for free Frosties. That the entire dollar comes back to the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. But there's lots of those campaigns that go on through the generosity of our Wendy's partners to allow that real estate to raise funds for the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. Right now, we're selling wristbands to celebrate foster care awareness and the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. You can go on our website at davethomasfoundation.org. Follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, share stories, let people know that you're a supporter of foster care adoption, or just join our mailing list to get updates about the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. I just want to share a quick video, and then I want to make sure we've got time for questions and answers, because I know I've zipped through a lot of this information very quickly, but we'll share a quick video and then we'll take time. So I've got my contact information up here, and I'll stop sharing in a second so we can have a chat. Please feel free to reach out to the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, or to reach out to me personally with any questions. If you have any concerns, or if you have any ideas for us, we welcome your input. And I'm happy to share this deck if folks want to share this with you later, so you've got that on hand. So let me stop sharing, and then we can take any questions that you might have.
Rita, I'd like to make a comment. Fantastic presentation, and it's a great organization. I was with Battelle for Kids for 10 years, and 3 of our best associates are now with your group, Julianne Nichols, Tim Kelso, and Maggie Malloy. And any group that has those 3 working for them has to be a phenomenal place. They are among the best professionals and people that I've ever worked with. So you're lucky to have them.
Thank you for saying that. And they've helped us with our communications, with our social media, all of those things that are so critical, particularly now in getting the word out about these children. So thank you. Yes, we appreciate that we were able to share their resources with us.
Rita, thanks for all of your efforts to help those children in foster care become adopted. And as Paul said, you are a very effective presenter. I guess I'm not sure I missed it or not, but can you describe a little bit of the recruitment process that you're using?
Absolutely, yeah. And again, these are not Dave Thomas Foundation for employees. Because children are in the custody of states or counties, what we do is give grants to those organizations, and they hire these full-time adoption professionals. And so they institute a strategy that is just different from business as usual. Right now in this country, there's a default to public displays of children. That's how we get them adopted. They're on websites, there are adoption fairs, typically websites. And we hope that charismatically someone who's interested in adopting goes onto a website, sees a picture and a description of a child, and says, oh, there's my child, right? And then begins that adoption process. That works for younger children, but it doesn't work for our target population of children. So the recruiters through the Wendy's Wonderful Kids program, first of all, commit to a small caseload of children, 12 to 15 children. They do a deep dive into the child's case file because they've been in care for so long. Within that case file, not only is a rich history of what this child has experienced, what homes they've been in, what their particular presenting issues may be, and where services need to be applied. But there's also a wealth of information about adults that have surrounded this child who might become potential adoptive parents if they knew that child was even available for adoption, including extended family members. There's a default in the child welfare system that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. If a child's removed from their home of origin because of abuse, then no family member is suitable for this child. When that's not the case, there are extended family members, grandparents, cousins, aunts and uncles, siblings. So finding those family members, as well as other individuals, teachers, former caseworkers, we've had children adopted by their best friend's family, but because children don't talk about this, they really don't want people to know what's happening in their life. The best friend's family didn't even know this child was available for adoption. So that deep dive into the case file is a rich a resource for these workers that because they have a smaller caseload of children, they have the time to dig into it. Equally important is they develop a relationship with every child on their caseload. They're required on a regular basis to have contact with this child. And so they do. And from that conversation, they not only develop a trusting relationship, but they learn from the child what they want, who's important in their lives. They're also required to develop relationships with everyone that's involved with this child, the child's social worker, attorneys that might be involved, therapists, anyone that surrounds this child. So over a period of once a child lands on a caseload after about 6 months, this becomes the expert in who this child is, what this child needs. They develop an aggressive recruitment plan, and then they go after that plan, and they don't give up on these children. We've had 21-year-olds adopted, so they keep working with these children no matter what. And it's a unique model. And now that it's evidence-based, the states are taking it on as well to say, this is how we treat this target population of children. So apologies that I dashed through that. There was just that one screen, but absolutely, it's a very rigorous strategy that just isn't employed unless a Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiter is doing this.
You, in part, may have answered this question, but could you speak to the kinds of policies that you would presently recommend state and the feds to be adapting to and moving?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. Recently, a major legislation was passed that will direct federal funding to prevention activities. It's the one thing we haven't done well in this country. How do we keep families from coming into the system to begin with? How do we surround families that have issues with substance abuse, with family violence, with other issues? How do we prevent? So again, a stronger policies on prevention for one, but also the other end. When these children are adopted, frequently they have needs and the family have needs that aren't addressed adequately. So post-adoption resources. How do we make sure a child can safely stay with their adoptive family if they have mental health issues, so that the family has access to adoption competent mental health resources, that the family has access to, you adopt a child at 16 and you haven't saved for college, advocating for more resources. And many states have some funds to help a child with college or help a family with college, but it may not be enough. So both those prevention services and post-adoption services are some of the things that we've advocated for and continue to advocate for. There's been a drive across this nation to extend foster care to 21, and not all states have taken that on. And so we're pushing to make sure that all states extend foster care to 21. Even that 18 to 21 in extended foster care has a lot of conditions. So making sure that every child has that access to extended services beyond 18 if they are going to, if we can't get them adopted. But then also pushing, look, this is a program that works. So pushing states to acknowledge the child-focused recruitment model, which is the model under Wendy's Wonderful Kids, having states recognize and drive evidence-based models for children at a policy level so that there isn't any question that resources can be dedicated to implementing and scaling this program.
I have to compliment you on recognizing past 18 as an adoptable child.
Absolutely.
My eldest was adopted at age 19.
Yeah.
And that issue of college was a big one that had delayed to some degree her adoption, because at that time, if we would have adopted her earlier, she would have lost all benefits.
Exactly.
So we
Exactly.
need to look at that issue constantly, that a child should have, even if they're adopted later. There's a barrier to adoption, actually.
And there are subsidies that follow children who are adopted out of foster care, but sometimes those subsidies aren't as much as what a foster parent may be receiving on foster care maintenance. And so we want to make sure that we don't disincentivize adoption because of the dollars that are on the table, making sure there are robust post-adoption resources for families who need those resources. No one's doing this to get rich at all, but they are critical resources for that child and for that family, absolutely.
Any other questions? Rita, I had mentioned to a few folks that I was looking very much forward to your presentation. And I have, as I mentioned earlier, I've been involved in the system quite a while. And you did not disappoint. You did an excellent job. And I congratulate Wendy's for developing great proven practices as you move forward. It's an extremely behind the scenes work that needs to keep coming out from behind the curtain to really talk about what's going on in terms of children in this country, in terms of adoption and foster care. And I appreciate the hard work of Wendy's to shine a light on it. And you're doing a great job with that.
Thank you. And we're just grateful to have some time today to talk to you about this and welcome an ongoing conversation with any one of you.
Okay, given that, we will, again, the speaker, we will not have a regular speaker. We will be hopefully inspiring your engagement with the club itself by our program on the 4th, and want everyone to attend. Again, thank you, Rita, for your presentation today. And in closing, let's do the 4-way test. If you can put that on the board. Thank you, Steve. And out of the things that we think, say, and do.
Is it the truth?
Secondly, is
it fair to all concerned?
Third,
Will it build goodwill and better friendships?
And fourth,
Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
To all of you, we will keep the line open for any informal discussions, and you can remain with us if you would like, but we do have an informal closing too. So thank you again. And I appreciate everyone's attendance today. And again, we'll keep the line open for a while for any questions or comments that you have amongst yourselves. Thank you.